And Elon is a hard act to follow. Elon's probably smarter than me. And maybe I'm smart that I realize that. But in Vacation Bible School, obviously, Noah's our theme, the flood, and then we've got different things we're talking about. And tonight, I'm talking about Noah, the man. Did you know that the only difference between Adam and the other men is I'm not sure Adam had a belly button. Noah did. And I bet you if everyone, well, no, there's somebody in here who doesn't have a belly button, but in general, you hear these people talk about how different they were. Okay, we have airplanes. I don't guess Noah had airplanes. But he was still a man. You look at computers. Truth is, I'm not sure we were smart using computers. We've kind of replaced ourselves with them. But we're going to talk about Noah the man. And open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 6. And there are 3 verses. It's amazing when you look at Genesis how much material, how much time, and how much is in that thing. And how many people are mentioned in Genesis, the whole thing. And they go from the day of creation until we get Abraham. Now, let's consider a few things when we talk about men and think about that. Noah lived to be 950 years old. Who was the oldest man we know of in the Bible? Methuselah. Okay, now, how old was Methuselah when he died? Okay, so he died, didn't he? Isn't it funny? How many of us think we're going to get out of here alive? All right, 969 years. If you take from Adam to Noah, Noah was Adam's 7th great-grandchild. Methuselah was Noah's grandpa. And when you look at all of these men, if you take Enoch out of the picture, how old was Enoch when he was gone? Didn't say he died. I gave you a chart. He was 365 years, and then Enoch was no more. The Lord took him. So I pulled him out of the mix. The average age for those 9 men was 912 years. Now, that doesn't quite happen anymore today. In the Bible, it talks about God gave 120 years, and for some reason, we're not getting to that 120, so we're doing something wrong, I suppose. Eddie, how old are you? Chris, how old's that old man sitting next to you? He can't hear either.
He's 92.
92. All right, now think about that. Noah worked on that ark roughly 120 years. So that means Eddie's 92 years old. And if Eddie's working on the ark, he's got 38 more years to do it. That's a long time. How many people are military people in this audience? How long was your boot camp? Oh, mine was 13 months. Months. When you go to a National Military Academy, they pick on you for a year and a month. But anyway, the whole point being, when you look at that, how many people here worked for 35 years before they could retire or quit working? Raise your hand if you could do it. All right, how many of you worked 40 years to reach that goal? All right. Who's worked 45 years? You know what? You're right. When you're dumb, you work 45 years.
Frank, I've worked all my life.
I understand, but you understand what I mean, though, an occupation where you're doing something, one thing. Okay, I've been home out of the Air Force for 41 years. So I've been a funeral director in a funeral home for 41 years. If you don't count my military time against me, I started when I was 6, and I'm 71. I could say I've done it for 65 years. But I'm only halfway to getting the ark finished. So it took quite a bit of perseverance to build that. Now, when we talk about this, you're talking about Noah. Noah's perfection. If you look at the verses, verse 8, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And then it talks about his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, let's talk about perfection. Is anybody in here perfect? If a little boy draws a circle, and then you get someone with a compass and they draw a circle, and then you have a computer draw a circle, what makes a perfect circle?
Same radius.
The lines connect. You start here, go all the way around, and you connect again. Now, doesn't say anything about things being microscopically perfect. It is a circle. Okay, 360 degrees. So, was Noah perfect? Who is the only person that came down here in physical form that was perfect? Jesus Christ. So what do they mean then when they talk about Noah was perfect in his generation? You have to look at the terms that are used to explain things like this. Okay, and basically, when you do Scripture, it said he was mature, he was complete. In other words, there are a lot of mature men in this audience. They're complete. They're perfect in the sense of they're doing what they need to be doing. They're raising their families. They're teaching the gospel to people. They're being honest and upright. And so they are mature people. Okay, how many of you in your teenage years were not perfect? Immature. How many of you did stuff that you sure hoped you didn't get caught and you sure hoped Daddy didn't find out about it? Now don't lie. Okay, I got shot at for stealing watermelons one time. So I wasn't exactly mature at that time. But when you look at it, okay, 6:8, Noah found grace in the eyes of God. Okay, what does that mean? It means God was willing to bestow upon him a gift, his favor. He was a just man. What is a just man? Okay. If you're dealing in business with someone, do you not want them to be just? You don't want them sitting there, a grocer putting his finger on the scale when he's selling you a pound of sugar. So Noah was a good, honest, just man. He was righteous. And when we say perfect in his generation, we're just talking about he was a mature individual. He did his job. He did what he was supposed to do. He gave a good example. Basically, he walked with God. And when you go to Genesis chapter 7, verse 1, and it says, "And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee I see righteousness before me in this generation." What does righteous mean? Alan, what's righteous mean?
Righteous means right doing.
Exactly, right doing. And apparently Noah was right doing for 120 years or so building the ark. In other words, he did not waver. And so, in general, he's not flawless. How do we know he's not flawless? Where do we find out he's not flawless? Look at
Brought them after the flood.
Look at Genesis 9:21. Going with verse 20, and Noah began to be an husbandman, and he planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. He got drunk. I don't know how many of you are in this room, but some of us got drunk. Okay. But Noah walked with God, but he was not perfect. Folks, if you're perfect, Jesus would not have had to come down here. So Noah is just like everybody else in this room. I think he had a little more discipline building an ark in 120 years, but so he was a man like us when you look at that. Basically, if you want to look at it, we work hard, we attend church, we raise our families, and we tell people about Jesus. And if you do that to the best of your ability, you're walking with God, because when you look at Matthew, what did he tell us to do? Go ye therefore in all the world. We're supposed to teach people. We're supposed to tell people about Jesus Christ. We're supposed to be as sinless as we possibly can be, which is impossible for us. Because of the blood of Jesus, we are made perfect in Christ. And then, when you think about that, does anybody really believe we came from monkeys? I mean, think about it. Were the Egyptians just like us as far as physiology? They may have been shorter by diet and stuff, but we were all the same. And so maturity is not flawless. Man is not flawless, but we're made perfect through the blood of Christ. But we can be mature people, and we can do what we're supposed to do. And if we mess up, we have the ability to correct that. So what we want to make sure is we don't distance ourselves from Noah and say, well, I can never do that. I can never be like that. How many people in here have built a house? I didn't build a house, but I kept a barn from falling down. Okay. What did Noah do? He just built an ark. You all have built a home. That ark was his home for a year. But my point being, don't think you can't be like Noah. I'm not sure we're going to build ourselves an ark as big as the ark he built, but it's possible that we can do that. When you look at it, I'm going to read one paragraph in the handout. It says, in our modern thinking, he would be a man who works hard to provide for his family, regularly attends worship with them, looks for opportunities in the community to tell others about Jesus, prays and stays away from sins like adultery, lying, pornography, etc. Right now, I can think of scores of men and women, probably hundreds, that would classify as perfect and walking with God if you use that definition. We stumble, we make mistakes, but just in general, I think most of us do a pretty good job of trying to do what God would have us do. Now, when you look at it, today we need to do what Noah did. What did he do? He made himself available to be used by God. Now, when we look at that, it's simple. We're to preach righteousness. We are to fight evil. We are to resist negative peer pressure and spiritually educate our families. I count myself blessed. I don't know what I did. I prayed a lot. Paul and I worked hard, but I've got 4 children. They're all still going to church. They've married Christian spouses, which is one of the highest recommended I make. If you're going to get married, marry a Christian. And right now we're going into my grandchildren are being raised that way. And my family's been most fortunate. My children will be the 5th generation, no divorces. I pray we get to 10 generations and so on and so on. But when you talk about people, we're in a small town. Do we know a lot about a lot of people in this town? Do you know what mechanic you'll go to because you trust them? Do you know what was it that say, I can't trust you unless I could trust your grandfather? You ever heard that saying? Well, how many people in here know someone's grandfather so you can know you can trust them? I can go pretty far back just by the way I made my living. When you do your first funeral when you're 60 and you're 71, the first thing, okay, Eddie, if you meet someone and you want to figure out who they are, who do you ask about them? What do you ask about them?
Probably older.
JC, if you meet someone from Crossville and you can't remember who they are, how do you find out who they are?
That's good, Mama.
Yeah. Used to be I'd ask them who their parents were. Now I ask them who their grandparents were. Okay, and sometimes I ask them who their great-grandparents were. Okay, but when you talk about that, it's a family deal. I mean, you're sitting there with 10 generations with Noah, and when you look at it, Noah didn't know Enoch because Enoch was gone before Noah was born. Noah didn't know Adam because Adam died basically 126 years before Noah was born. Noah also did not know, he didn't know, can't read. He didn't know Seth. And so after Seth, he knew all the others with the exception of Enoch. So there was a lot of overlap there, a lot of families. So if you looked at Noah, Noah might not know who his 7th great-grandpa was, but he knew who his 5th back great-grandpa was all the way back. Okay, but things like that. Now, let's talk about obedience and training. In other words, what he did. It's an interesting thing. How many of you have been on a sports team? How much of you have? Those of us in the military were kind of on a sports team. But anyway, how do you get good at something? How many basketball players had to throw 100 free throws because you missed one in the game? And when you're throwing that 100, if you miss one, you start all over. Okay. If you're on a track team, you're a short distance sprinter. How many times do you run that 100 meters before you get to the meet? How many times do the members of a football team practice plays over and over again until the coach is satisfied that you know how to do it? Now, physically, how do you picture Noah? Was he a little scrawny guy? No muscle, just whatever? Was he, yeah, look at the bulletin. Was he a fat man? You ever say, okay, how many here have ever done several hours or half a day of picking up rock out of the woods? What do those rock quarry guys look like? Man, they're muscle men.
Hey, Frank.
Yeah.
You know, there's a term, country stock.
Yeah.
Drink strong.
Oh, yeah. For
That's
example.
what I envision.
You know what I found out in high school, back when I was in, if Coach Pemberton, and some of you remember who said, caught boys fighting, he'd take you in the gym and put 20-ounce gloves on you. And you'd pound on each other till you couldn't keep your hands up. And if you were out first, the other guy would just pound on you till he couldn't keep his hands up. You know what I found out? Don't ever get in a boxing match with a rock quarry boy. Their arms do not get tired. Dennis.
Well, I watched God one day use a saw down, chainsaw, cutting up a tree. Noah did it without a chainsaw.
Oh, yeah. John Roberts. He could chainsaw all day long. Most of us, I dare say, we'd be wore out after an hour or so. Some of you that go out and help and clean up on the weekend, You wear out pretty quick trying to handle that chainsaw, don't you? The whole point is, though, any action you do, you have to have the discipline to continue. Now think about this. He took 120 years and he built an ark. He built a giant boat. And that 120 years, he's sitting there shaping lumber manually, sawing boards, cutting them, cutting down trees, turning them into lumber. We believe pitch is tar. Now, where he got it from, I don't know. But the magnitude of the material that had to get together to build that vessel. And he was a man that spent 100 years building what God told him to build. Doug?
I was just going to say, we talk about him building it, and obviously he did, and he oversaw it. But don't you think his sons also helped him participate?
I think his sons probably did, because his oldest boy was 98 when the flood hit. So his boys were babies, and they watched him do it. And then I'm sure every one of them were pretty good woodworkers by the time they got it finished. But
the one thing we're not talking about is how old was Noah when he started building.
he's an old man.
Yeah, he was 500 years
He was through half of his life. So if you think about it in today's term, 70 years. So that means he was 35 years old, probably something like that. He'd be like a 35-year-old man. And I'm going to build an ark, and I'm 35. And now I'm 71, and I've finally got it built. So I've spent half my life, but he didn't spend half of his life. But anyway, yeah, he was not a spring chicken. I'm not exactly sure when it was they became adults. I know in the Jewish tradition, when you're 30 years old, you're a man. In our, depending on what state you're in today, you're 21 or 18. I'm 71, and my wife tells me to quit acting like a kid a lot. So it's just one of those things. But if you think about those of us that have been in the military, okay, we did what we were told to do. Elon, did we do it exactly like we were told to do it?
Not always. Sometimes I came out the door upside down.
All right. But the point being, what happened if you didn't do it like you were told to?
You noticed it.
Yeah, and someone else noticed it too, didn't they? Yeah. But anyway, who understands authority? You know what I liked about the military? I knew who the boss was. The boss was anybody that outranked me. Didn't question it, didn't have to whine or anything. We understood authority. And Noah knew who the boss was. He understood authority. Never questioned. As far as I can tell, he didn't gripe. He just did what he said because he walked with God. Now, think about it this way. If we were going to build a wooden boat today and Noah came in and gave you his credentials, would you hire him to help you build the boat? You know what's sad is I watch old men put young men to shame. I've had old men digging graves that are my age, and they'll sit there and they'll dig a grave in 3 hours, and I'll get me 12 young men and they can't get the grave dug in all day long. So age can be an impact, but there's a lot of things to be said about age. Let me get to my phone where I want it to be, if I can. I may have to. Okay, here we are. Now, when we're looking at that, the fact that it was physically demanding, wasn't it? When you build a boat, what do you need?
Wood.
Okay.
Planks.
How do you get wood?
Go get it.
So did he build the boat out of logs?
I'm not sure.
I don't think he did. I think he turned it into lumber. How do you make logs into lumber? I know how to do it today, but if we're out in the woods and want to make a board, how are we going to do it? Yeah. Abraham Lincoln was called the rail splitter. Why? Because he split those rails and things like that. And how much food does it take to feed an elephant for a year? You know, there's great discussion about, okay, when they said animals of their kind, okay, Noah had to collect food for them. I'm pretty sure they ate while they were on the ark, unless God put them all in a super daze, and it doesn't say anything about that. But, and then how in the world did he know what everything ate? Okay, I'm sure God helped him do it, but can you imagine going out? Okay, let's make it simple. I've got 2 little bitty chipmunks, and I'm going to feed them acorns. How many acorns does it take to feed 2 little bitty chipmunks for a year?
Frank, do we know that all these animals were fully grown?
No, we don't. And we also sit here and think that every critter that's here today, how many breeds of dog are there now? You ever seen the movie about what dogs would turn into if we quit breeding them? They'd be a mutt, probably weigh about 40 pounds. We have worked and worked and worked to create these. I think little Yorkies are as cute as can be, but I don't think there were any Yorkies on the ark. Now, when you talk about how big they were, yeah, you could take little babies and it'd be a lot easier. I don't know, though, if you had little baby alligators, trying to keep track of them would be harder. The way you find out where the big alligator is just go walking down the aisle. When it chomps you, you know you've found it. But just think about that, though, the semantics of what he had to do. And he had to get it all on board. I don't think that the elephant food just marched itself on the ark and sat down where he wanted it. He didn't have a front end fork loader. How many of you have unloaded a train car of bags of cement or bags of feed? How many of you have helped load railroad ties? Are there any farm boys in here? How many of you raised on a farm?
I've loaded trailers full of hay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think he had more than tractor trailer trucks loads of stuff in that ark. How many of you have seen the ark? Is it in Kentucky? I need to go see that thing. I like the commercial where the giraffe's walking up, sees it, and passes out. It's really big, isn't it?
What's the ark look like based on the Bible?
Yeah.
What's it look like?
Well, I don't think I heard what you said. Say it again.
I said, what does the ark look like based on the Bible's instruction? What does it look like?
I always thought if you took a proportionate thing, you'd have a tuba tin about 3.5 feet long, as wide as it was, and maybe half an inch thicker. It looks like a big rectangular box in my mind. Is like a modern super tanker.
So why is it built that way?
Stability. I mean, it's the most stable thing you can get for not capsizing and turning over and rolling over.
Same ratio in the ark is the same ratio they used to build barges today.
Yeah. And it's a very efficient thing for space to store stuff.
It wasn't made to sail. It was made to float.
Yeah. Just float around and not turn over.
Right. I think we ought to get a group together.
Yeah. That would be a good trip. Now, how mentally challenging was it? You know, some days at the funeral home drives me crazy. Did you ever have days like that, Alan? Okay. Have your teenagers ever got on that last nerve and driven you crazy? Okay. Think of the stress. Do you know right now, men trying to build houses can't get the material to build it? That's stressful. You know, you've got everything lined up.
12 weeks to get a window made.
Yeah. And Noah is sitting there having, I wonder how many pieces of lumber it took to build that thing. I would say it was in the millions. But just the mental stress. You start this, let's look at it. Here's a list of what they talked about. Where and how do I start this project? Okay, God told him to build an ark. He probably had no clue what an ark was. When his friends came by, "What are you doing, Noah?" "Well, I'm building an ark." "Well, what's an ark? What's it for? What are you going to do with it?" And for 120 years, they're watching him build this thing, and it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. How many of you think people thought, "What in the world is wrong with him? He's gone crazy. We need to put him in a box somewhere"? Okay. Tool, scaffolding, other equipment. What is the best way to turn these logs into material that I can build an ark? How will I keep my measurements accurate and consistent throughout the project? I'm assuming it looked pretty good. I don't think it looked like some of us took rough cut lumber and cobbled together a box in a week. And what is the best and most efficient way to execute the details? Just like he said, the design was the most accurate measurements to float and not sink and not be capsized.
I use this at prison quite often. It's true from the Bible. In 1919, we built our first concrete barge. The proportion of that barge was exactly the same as that which Noah built. 300 by 50 by 30.
Right. And it floated, didn't it?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Very well.
Yeah. And so then he's got this big pile of lumber. I'm sure it was bigger than this room. Probably several of these rooms. Then he had to put it together.
Like it's always, in literature, it's always shown with a keel fore and aft, which runs the full length of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that actually had a keel. A keel floats better, but that may not be accurate.
He had a good plan. You better have a plan if you're going to get those boards up on the top.
Exactly. Now, how many of you you're sitting here on Christmas Eve, your wife brings this big box out, and you open it, and it says, "Some construction required." Well, here's Noah. The best thing he had going for him was his master builder, because I'm sure every day when he started, he prayed for God for guidance. And I don't know exactly how God trained him to build that ark, but apparently it worked pretty good, because the thing stayed afloat for a year. When you talk about that. Okay, now, have you ever had your neighbor watch you do something and come up and, "What are you doing?" Have you ever done something and they just thought you were crazy for doing it? You ever gone door knocking? What was it they came after you with? A chainsaw. Okay. Did that stop you from door knocking? Well, you didn't knock on that door a second time, did you? Now think about this. Boy, Noah would like to have had your chainsaw. I'm sure he did. But the point being, he persevered. And he didn't let it get him down. Because I'm sure, I don't know how many people Noah knew, but I'm pretty sure by the time he got that ark finished, he had a lot of people who were asking him what he thought he was doing. And am I right, L.A.?
In that line of thinking, it says that the earth was corrupt and filled with violence. And to me, if I was a violent person, I would think that ark would be a great bonfire.
Oh, yeah.
How do you think Noah avoided, as long as he was out preaching, how did he avoid all the violence and the corruption while trying to do this huge project? Have you thought about that, or heard anybody talk about
The
that?
only thing I can think of is they were waiting to see what it was he was making, because they didn't have a clue what an ark was. I'm not even sure Noah exactly knew what it was when he started. And maybe they're all just sitting there looking at it. Okay, they want you to get it finished, and then they're going to burn it down. Only it rained. But your point is well taken. Those people were evil people, wicked people. They weren't They did not walk upright. They didn't walk with God. They weren't righteous people. But I don't even know what they built houses of back then. Maybe they didn't build wooden houses, so they didn't need the wood. I'm not sure how you answer that question, L.A., but the point is well taken. They weren't nice people in his neighborhood. But think about it this way: if they're lazy and fat, and he's that rock quarry guy, they might not have wanted to mess with him. And but anyway, when you think about what it took to do that, it just staggers the mind. I mean, honestly, if I was Bezos and had $100 billion and I was going to build an ark, a real ark, because I don't think the one in Kentucky is made of wood, is it? It cost me a fortune just to get the wood fixed up and everything else to try to duplicate as close as I think what it was he built. It would.
The answer to what L.A.'s saying is that God was with God protected, and God protects us now, not necessarily in this life, but for eternity.
Okay. Now,
one thing bothers me is what was the skill set of the kingdom. See, if we think about something, we're thinking that everybody at that time were not learning. The fact is, the earth that lasted so long, and we had so many people that corrupt, what was their skill set at that time? He may have had a whole crew of people that knew how to do all this stuff. They had talents that we don't.
right. Well, they were used to doing it manually. But by Bible, it doesn't say that anybody helped him build it.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying though that the people at that time, the set of people, how did it so corrupt that God was going to destroy us of? We're just now getting corrupt enough that we think it's going to destroy us, and look at the skills that the people in the world have today. What about the skills of those people that Noah had to be smart?
Well,
I know God helped him, but it just wasn't bad.
Well, but I know one skill set they didn't have. There was only one boat builder.
But there was no need for boats.
Huh?
There was no need.
I know. I don't think, if I'm right, it never rained, had it?
No rain.
They had springs and stuff, but they'd never had a thunderstorm. They didn't know what a gully washer was. Okay, now today, how can we walk with God? What can we do? What instructions are we given to be like Noah? Okay, think about it this way. Giving generously and joyfully. How many people actually think about saving up the money so when Sunday comes, you've got Monday to give? You've got little bitty kids, and they can either spend that quarter on a candy bar or put it in the collection plate, and they put it in the collection plate. And they do it because they choose to do it. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 through 10. But that is one way we can be like Noah. That's one way how we can walk with God. Now, but this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. Every man according as he purposed in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that ye always, having all sufficiency in all things, may abound everyone in good works. God takes care of us. We may not think that, but if we don't think God takes care of us, we lack faith. In the Hall of Fame, what did it say? By faith, Noah. Every person in there is by faith they did something. If you want to walk with God, do you hang around with drunkards and a beer joint? Who do you hang around with? You've got to be willing to walk away from people if you're going to walk with God. Okay, how's your language? If you hit your hand with the nail, what do you say? Yeah, be careful what you say. You know, keep your thoughts clear, keep your language clear, do not be vulgar. And number one, if you try to spread the gospel, you may not do a good job of it, but if you're trying to spread the gospel, you're doing exactly what Noah did. You're doing what God has asked you to do.